The floorboards above us groaned like old bones as my younger brother pressed against me in the suffocating darkness beneath his bed. My trembling hands covered his small ears, trying to muffle the sounds that no child should ever hear: the rhythmic creaking, the muffled sobs, the whispered threats that seeped through our thin Tennessee farmhouse walls like poison gas. In that moment, huddled in the dust and shadows, I understood with terrible clarity that monsters weren't creatures hiding under beds. They walked among us in broad daylight, shared our meals, and wore the faces of people who were supposed to love us. My name is Eleanor Matthews, though folks around these parts have always known me as Miss Ellie. At 87 years old, I sit in the rocking chair my late husband Thomas built for me on the front porch of our Victorian home in Louisville, watching my great-grandchildren chase lightning bugs across the carefully tended lawn. The evening air carries the scent of honeysuckle and the distant sound of church bells, and in these twilight moments, I often find myself marveling at the distance we've traveled from those dark days in Millbrook, Tennessee. But tonight feels different. Tonight, with the weight of nearly 9 decades pressing gently on my shoulders, I feel compelled to set down the full truth of our story, not just for my family, but for anyone who has ever wondered whether light can truly overcome darkness, whether love can heal what seems irreparably broken. It began in 1938 in a small farming community nestled among the rolling hills of eastern Tennessee, where tobacco fields stretched to the horizon and everybody knew everybody else's business, or thought they did. Our house sat at the end of a dusty lane, a modest 2-story structure with white clapboard siding that my father Samuel Matthews kept meticulously painted despite our lean circumstances. Daddy worked at Henderson's mill on the edge of town, operating the massive grinding stones that transformed local farmers' grain into flour and meal. He was a man carved from the very mountains surrounding us, solid, dependable, with hands that were gentle when they touched his children, but strong enough to lift 100-pound sacks as if they were pillows. Even as a young girl, I sensed depths in him that others failed to recognize, a careful intelligence that observed everything while revealing nothing. What I didn't know then was that Daddy had been watching, waiting, and planning for months before everything came to a head. Hidden beneath loose floorboards in our kitchen, he kept a small leather journal where he recorded dates, times, and observations in his careful handwriting.
Tuesday, April 12th. Caroline left 1:30 p.m. claiming ladies' circle meeting. Mrs. Henderson confirms no meeting scheduled. Saturday, April 16th. Found unfamiliar tobacco ash on front porch. Caroline doesn't smoke.
Monday, April 18th. Savings tin lighter by $8. Caroline claims groceries, but pantry unchanged. He was building a case with the patience of a man who understood that one chance might be all he'd get. My mother, Caroline, possessed the kind of dangerous beauty that made sensible men lose their minds and cautious women cross the street. Her auburn hair caught sunlight like captured fire. Her green eyes sparkled with mischief that men mistook for invitation, and her figure drew appreciative glances from every male in 3 counties. She moved through our small town like visiting royalty, always impeccably dressed, despite our modest means, trailing expensive perfume and whispered rumors in her wake. While Daddy earned every penny through honest labor that left him bone-tired each evening, Mother invented increasingly elaborate excuses for her frequent absences. She would stand before our cracked mirror, applying rouge and lipstick with theatrical precision, announcing her various charitable obligations. Mrs. Patterson needs help with her preserving. She'd declare, though anyone with functioning eyes could see that tending sick neighbors didn't require silk stockings and French perfume. The church social committee is meeting to plan the Harvest Festival. She'd insist, despite the fact that our Baptist congregation held such meetings on Wednesday afternoons, not Saturday evenings when traveling salesmen typically passed through town. One evening, in late spring, as I helped Daddy shave with his straight razor, a ritual we'd established after Mother declared such tasks unsuitably intimate, I worked up the courage to voice what had been troubling me. Daddy, why does Mother need to look so fancy just to help church ladies? His hands stilled for a moment, and in the mirror, I saw something flicker across his weathered face, a shadow of pain quickly suppressed. Your mother has always been beautiful, Ellie girl. Some women feel they need to look their best no matter where they're going. But Mrs. Henderson and Mrs. Wilson don't wear rouge to church meetings. No, he said quietly, they don't. He resumed shaving, but I caught him studying my reflection in the mirror with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Sadness mixed with something harder, more determined. Ellie, you're 13 now, old enough to understand that sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt the people who love them. When that happens, other grown-ups have to make different choices to protect what matters most. I didn't fully comprehend his meaning then, but something in his tone made me pay closer attention to the undercurrents swirling through our household. The burden of maintaining our home fell squarely on my shoulders, while Mother pursued her mysterious commitments. I cooked our meals over the wood-burning stove, scrubbed our clothes on the washboard until my knuckles bled, and minded 6-year-old Benjamin as if motherhood were my natural calling rather than hers. Daddy helped when exhaustion didn't claim him entirely, but mill work demanded every ounce of his strength, especially during harvest season, when farmers brought their grain in endless wagon loads. It was during this period that Benjamin began changing in ways that filled me with nameless dread. My previously sunny brother grew withdrawn and fearful, jumping at sudden noises and flinching when anyone approached him unexpectedly. He stopped playing with the neighbor children, preferring to hide in shadowy corners like a wounded animal. Most disturbing of all, he resumed wetting his bed, a habit he'd outgrown years earlier, and would wake screaming from nightmares he refused to describe. What's wrong, Benny?" I asked repeatedly while changing his soiled sheets before Daddy could discover them. "Are the older boys at school bothering you?" But he would only shake his head mutely, his large brown eyes filled with terror too vast for such a small person to carry. I assumed schoolyard bullying was the culprit, never imagining that the real predator lived under our own roof, wearing our mother's beautiful face. One sticky July evening, as cicadas sang their endless chorus outside our windows, I found Daddy sitting alone on the front porch, long after Benjamin and I had been sent to bed. Unable to sleep in the stifling heat, I crept downstairs for a drink of water and discovered him hunched over something in his lap, writing by the light of a kerosene lantern. "Daddy, what are you doing out here so late?" He startled quickly, closing what I now realize was his journal, but not before I glimpsed columns of dates and careful notations. "Just thinking, daughter. Sometimes a man needs to sit with his thoughts." I settled beside him on the steps, drawn by something fragile in his voice. "Are you worried about something?" For a long moment, he stared out at the fireflies dancing across our yard. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone wrestling with impossible choices. "Ellie, if you ever saw something happening that you knew was wrong, something that could hurt someone you loved, what would you do?" The question seemed too heavy, too adult for me to answer properly. I guess I'd try to stop it, even if stopping it meant everything in your life would change forever. I considered this carefully, sensing the importance of my response. If it would protect someone I loved, yes. He nodded slowly, reaching over to squeeze my hand with his calloused fingers. "That's what I thought you'd say. You're growing into a fine young woman, Ellie girl. Your mother and I are lucky to have you." The mention of mother in such a context struck me as odd, but before I could question it further, he'd sent me back to bed with instructions to check on Benjamin. I found my brother curled in his narrow bed, whimpering in his sleep, and something cold settled in the pit of my stomach. 3 weeks later, on a sweltering evening when heat lightning flickered across the Tennessee sky, everything changed forever. Mother had announced her intention to attend a special prayer service in Crossroads, a town 15 miles away, suspicious since we were devout Baptists and had never shown interest in Methodist activities. Sister Margaret specifically requested my help with their visiting missionary program. She explained,
while arranging her hair in elaborate curls. "It's a great honor to represent our community." She emerged from her bedroom wearing an emerald silk dress I'd never seen before, her lips painted scarlet trailing expensive perfume that cost more than Daddy's weekly wages. After she departed in a rustle of silk and secrets, I tried to maintain normalcy for Benjamin's sake, but he refused to eat his cornbread and kept glancing fearfully toward the windows as darkness fell.
"Will she be back tonight, Ellie?" He whispered, his small voice barely audible above the cricket songs.
"She always comes back, Benny," I assured him, though we both knew she might vanish for days without explanation. "Let's get you ready for bed."
I was jerked awake sometime after midnight by heart-wrenching sobs coming from Benjamin's room. Assuming he was suffering another nightmare, I crept down the hallway, my bare feet silent on the worn wooden floors. When I eased open his bedroom door, moonlight streaming through thin curtains revealed a scene that seared itself permanently into my memory. Mother sat on the edge of Benjamin's narrow bed, one hand clamped firmly over his mouth, while the other moved beneath his nightshirt in ways that made my soul recoil in absolute horror. Her eyes were glazed with whiskey, her carefully arranged hair disheveled, and she moved with the predatory confidence of someone who believed herself untouchable. The moment she noticed me standing frozen in the doorway, those cold green eyes locked onto mine with lethal calculation.
"What are you staring at, you little spy?"
She hissed, her words slurred, but her threat crystal clear.
"Get back to your room this instant and keep that mouth shut forever. Nobody would believe such filthy lies anyway."
The words struck me like physical blows, but what devastated me more completely was the sudden terrible understanding they brought. Benjamin's recent changes, his overwhelming fear, the bedwetting episodes, everything made horrifying sense. This wasn't a recent development. This violation had been occurring for months, possibly years, while I slept peacefully mere feet away. I stumbled backward to my room, in a daze, somehow finding the strength to drag my heavy dresser across the door. My entire body shook uncontrollably as tears streamed down my face. How many nights had Benjamin endured this abuse while I dreamed of better days? How could our own mother, the woman who gave us life, inflict such evil upon her own child? The next morning, after Mother had slipped away before sunrise to avoid questions, I found Benjamin curled beneath his bed like a small, wounded animal. His eyes were swollen from crying, his pajamas damp with perspiration, and worse. When I coaxed him out with gentle words, the full scope of the horror emerged through patient questioning. The abuse had begun 2 years earlier, during a week when I was bedridden with scarlet fever, and Daddy had to remain overnight in town, caring for me at Dr. Wilson's clinic. Mother had told Benjamin that speaking about their special games would result in him being sent to the county orphanage, that neither Daddy nor I would believe his wicked lies, and that Daddy would beat him senseless for spreading evil stories about his mama. "She said you and Daddy would stop loving me if you knew how dirty I was," Benjamin whispered, his small voice breaking my heart into pieces. "She said bad boys who tell lies about their mamas get sent away forever." The calculated cruelty of those threats stole my breath. To terrorize a child with abandonment and violence to ensure silence about sexual abuse revealed an evil beyond my comprehension. Benny listened very carefully, I said, holding his trembling hands in mine. "She lied about absolutely everything. You are not dirty or bad. What she did to you was wrong, not anything you did. Daddy and I will always love you no matter what, and nobody will ever send you away from us. I promise you that with my whole heart." From that moment forward, I never left Benjamin's side. I moved his mattress into my room, secured our bedroom door each night, with a chair wedged beneath the handle, and kept a poker from the fireplace hidden under my bed in case I needed to defend us. When Mother returned from her latest disappearance, 3 days spent with Robert Nash, a traveling liquor salesman, Though I wouldn't learn his name until later, I studied her with completely different eyes, seeing past the beautiful exterior to the predator lurking underneath. Daddy noticed our behavioral changes immediately. He observed how Benjamin clung to me constantly, how I locked our bedroom door each night, and how both of us grew visibly tense whenever Mother approached. But rather than confronting me directly, he began asking careful questions designed to build my trust while gathering information. Benjamin's been having nightmares, he observed one evening while we prepared supper together. More than usual, it seems. Yes, I replied, cautiously testing his reaction. He's been scared of things lately. What kind of thing? I hesitated, then decided to venture slightly closer to the truth. He gets frightened when people come into his room at night. Daddy's hands stilled as he sliced potatoes, and I saw his jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. People or a particular person? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. I found myself studying his face, searching for any sign of disbelief or dismissal. Instead, I saw careful attention and something that looked like controlled anger. Someone who shouldn't be there, I whispered. He set down his knife and turned to face me fully. Ellie, if someone has been hurting Benjamin, hurting either of you, I need you to know that you can tell me. Whatever it is, however bad you think it might be, you can trust me with the truth. The sincerity in his voice nearly broke my resolve, but fear still held my tongue. What if he didn't believe me? What if he believed me, but felt powerless to stop it? What if confronting Mother made everything worse for Benjamin? I'm not sure what to say, Daddy. He knelt down to my eye level, his weathered hands gentle on my shoulders. Then don't say anything yet. Just know that when you're ready, I'll be here to listen. And Ellie, whatever's been happening in this house, it's going to stop. I give you my word on that. Those words haunted me for days. I desperately wanted to share this crushing burden, to let someone stronger and wiser take control of the situation. But doubt whispered insidiously that even good men might crumble when faced with such unthinkable evil within their own families. What I didn't realize was that Daddy had already begun taking action based on his own observations and growing suspicions. 3 days after our conversation, I discovered him in deep discussion with Jeremy Wilson, Dr. Wilson's 16-year-old son, who fancied himself a newspaper reporter. Jeremy had recently acquired a portable recording device and spent his afternoons documenting local events. That's quite a machine you have there, son, Daddy was saying as I approached them near Henderson's general store. Yes, sir, Mr. Matthews. This can record conversations clear as if you were standing right there listening. I'm using it to preserve our town's history for future generations. Fascinating, Daddy replied, examining the device with apparent casual interest. I don't suppose you'd be willing to loan it out occasionally. I have some family stories I'd like to preserve conversations with my elderly relatives before their memories fade. Jeremy practically glowed with pride at being taken seriously by an adult. Of course, sir. I'd be honored to help preserve your family history. Much obliged. I'll stop by your father's office to arrange the details. As we walked home, I studied Daddy's profile, sensing undercurrents I couldn't quite grasp. Why do you want to record family stories, Daddy? Sometimes it's important to have an exact record of what people say, he replied carefully. Memory can be unreliable, but a recording captures the truth precisely as it happened. Meanwhile, Mother's behavior grew increasingly reckless and dangerous. Her absences stretched longer, her returns more dramatic and confrontational. She began bringing home expensive gifts that our modest income could never have afforded: French perfume, pearl earrings, silk scarves that gleamed like captured starlight. When Daddy questioned these luxuries, she claimed they were gifts from the well-to-do widow she'd supposedly begun working for as a companion. Mrs. Whitmore is so generous, she would purr, fingering her new jewelry. She says I remind her of her daughter who passed away. These little tokens are her way of showing appreciation for my companionship. Daddy would nod and murmur appropriate responses. But I caught him examining these items later, when she wasn't present, his expression growing harder and more distant with each discovery. He wasn't the simple, trusting man everyone believed him to be. 2 weeks after the incident with Jeremy's recording device, our precarious existence exploded into chaos. It began with Mother announcing another evening obligation, this time a special service at the Presbyterian Church in Whitmore, 20 miles away. Reverend Patterson specifically requested my assistance with their visiting temperance speaker, she explained while applying rouge to her cheeks. Apparently, my reputation for moral guidance has spread beyond our own community. The irony of her words, given what I knew about her nighttime activities with Benjamin, would have been laughable if the situation weren't so horrific. She emerged from her bedroom, wearing a crimson dress I'd never seen before, her hair elaborately styled, trailing expensive perfume that filled our small kitchen. After she departed in a rustle of silk and lies, Benjamin and I huddled together in my room, both of us sensing that something significant was about to happen. Around 10 o'clock, we were startled by aggressive pounding on our front door, followed by Mother's voice thick with alcohol and rage. "Open this door right now, you ungrateful little witch!" she screamed, her refined facade completely abandoned. "I know you're in there hiding like cowards." I held Benjamin close while we cowered in my bedroom, praying she would eventually give up and leave. But the pounding intensified, accompanied by the sound of something heavy, perhaps a rock or piece of firewood, striking our wooden door repeatedly. "I'll break this door down if I have to," she shrieked. "When I get my hands on you, Eleanor Matthews, you'll regret the day you were born." Then I heard a man's voice, attempting to calm her deeper, rougher, definitely not Daddy's gentle tone. "Easy there, Caroline," the stranger said, his words slightly slurred with drink. "You're making enough racket to wake half the county. Come back to the hotel and we'll sort this mess out tomorrow." "I don't want to sort it out tomorrow," Mother snarled back. "I want to teach that meddling brat a lesson she'll never forget." The threat in her voice was unmistakable. If she gained entry to our house, Benjamin and I would face physical violence. For several more terrifying minutes, she continued attempting to force our door while cursing us with language that would have scandalized the church ladies she claimed to associate with. Finally, her male companion, Robert Nash, though I wouldn't learn his name until later, convinced her to abandon her assault. "Come on, Caroline. The door's solid oak and you're making too much noise. Sheriff Henderson might come sniffing around if someone reports a disturbance." Their voices gradually faded as they moved away from our house, but I remained awake all night, clutching the fireplace poker and listening for any sign of their return. Benjamin pressed against me, both of us, understanding that we had crossed some invisible line into genuine danger. Just after sunrise, I heard Daddy's familiar footsteps on the porch, followed by his voice calling gently for us. When I cautiously opened our barricaded door, I found him standing in our living room with an expression I'd never seen before. Grim satisfaction mixed with protective determination that transformed his entire demeanor. "Oh, where were you all night, Daddy?" I asked, noting that his clothes were wrinkled and he carried Jeremy Wilson's recording device in a small canvas bag. "Taking care of business that should have been handled long ago," he replied, setting the device carefully on our kitchen table. "Did your mother come home last night?" She tried to break down the door. I explained, then described the terrifying scene that had unfolded on our porch. Daddy listened without interruption, his jaw tightening with each detail I recounted. "She won't be bothering you again," he said with quiet certainty. "But before I explain what happened, I need you to tell me something, Ellie. And I need you to be completely honest with me, no matter how difficult it might be." Something in his tone warned me that this conversation would change everything between us forever. "What do you need to know, Daddy?" "I need to know what your mother has been doing to Benjamin." The directness of his question caught me completely off guard. For a moment, I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except stare at him in shock. He knew. Somehow, without me saying a word, He already knew. "How did you—"
I've been watching Ellie, paying attention to things I should have noticed months ago. Benjamin's behavior changes his nightmares the way both of you react when she comes near him. But I need to hear it from you. I need you to tell me exactly what you've seen."
And so, taking the deepest breath of my young life, I told him everything. The words poured out like water through a broken dam. What I had witnessed in Benjamin's room, the months of abuse my brother had endured, the threats mother had made to ensure his silence. Daddy listened without interruption, his face growing paler with each revelation, his hands slowly clenching into fists. When I finished, I expected shocked disbelief, perhaps even anger at me for keeping such a devastating secret. Instead, what I saw in his face was something far more unsettling, cold, calculated rage that had been building for months, waiting for confirmation of what he had already suspected. "How long have you known about this?" he asked, his voice deadly quiet. 2 weeks, I whispered. "I wanted to tell you immediately, but I was terrified you might not believe me."
"Not believe you." The pain in his voice cut deeper than any accusation could have. "Ellie, you're my daughter. Your word is sacred to me. I would believe you if you told me the sun rose in the west. Then why didn't you do something sooner? Why did you let it continue?" Instead of defensiveness, his response revealed the careful strategy he had been implementing all along. "Because I needed proof, daughter. Proof that would protect you and Benjamin forever, not just temporarily. Your mother is clever and manipulative. Without irrefutable evidence, she could have convinced people that you were lying, that I was jealous or unstable. She might even have been able to take you children away from me legally." He gestured toward the recording device on our table. "But now I have her confession in her own voice, admitting to everything she's done. She can never claim innocence again, never twist the truth to make herself look like the victim."
"Her confession? When did she confess?"
"Last night at the Crossroads Hotel, where I found her with Robert Nash." His expression hardened further. "I recorded everything, her bragging about the abuse, their plans to steal what remained of our savings and flee to California, even Nash's threats when I confronted them with the evidence." I could barely process what he was telling me. My quiet, seemingly submissive father had not only discovered mother's secrets, but had strategically gathered evidence that could destroy her completely. "What happened after you played the recording for them?" "At first, they tried to deny everything, claimed the recording was somehow faked. Then Nash pulled a knife and threatened to kill me if I didn't hand over the device." Daddy's voice remained steady, but I saw his hands tremble slightly at the memory. "That's when I told them about the copies." "Copies, 3 of them. One hidden in this house, another deposited with Sheriff Henderson, and the third given to Dr. Wilson for safekeeping. I explained that if anything happened to me or my children, those copies would automatically be delivered to the state authorities, the church leaders, and the regional newspaper." The brilliance of his strategy became clear. He had neutralized their ability to harm us while ensuring they faced consequences for their actions, regardless of what they chose to do next. "Your mother realized her position was hopeless," he continued. "Her beauty and charm couldn't manipulate a recording device, and Nash understood that killing me would only guarantee their capture and execution. So we reached an understanding." "What kind of understanding?" "They leave Tennessee immediately and never contact us again. In exchange, I keep the recordings private as long as they honor the agreement. I also visited Judge Morrison before dawn and filed for dissolution of my marriage on grounds of adultery, child abandonment, and child abuse. The judge granted an emergency decree based on the evidence I provided." I was stunned by the thoroughness of his planning. "So Mother can never come back?" "She has no legal claim to this family anymore," he confirmed. "We're free to start over wherever we choose without any shadow from the past following us." Within hours, our few precious belongings were packed into Mr. Henderson's delivery wagon for the journey to Knoxville, where Daddy's sister Ruth ran a successful bakery and had agreed to take us in. As we rolled away from Millbrook, I looked back one final time at the only home I had ever known. The white clapboard house grew smaller with each turn of the wagon wheels until it disappeared entirely behind the rolling Tennessee hills.
I felt no sadness for what we were leaving behind, only profound relief that we had escaped before Mother's evil could destroy us completely.
Our new life in Knoxville with Aunt Ruth proved to be everything Millbrook had not been. Aunt Ruth was a widow whose husband had died in a mining accident 5 years earlier, leaving her to run their bakery alone. She was a woman of immense practical wisdom and gentle strength, and she welcomed us with open arms and endless questions about our sudden departure from Millbrook.
"Samuel, you look like a man who's been carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders," she observed during our first evening in her comfortable kitchen above the bakery. "What happened down in Millbrook?"
Daddy told her everything: the abuse, the investigation, the confrontation, our escape. Aunt Ruth listened without judgment, occasionally reaching over to squeeze Benjamin's small hand or stroke my hair, as the full scope of our ordeal emerged. "That poor child," she murmured when Daddy finished his account, her eyes bright with unshed tears as she looked at Benjamin. "Samuel, you did exactly the right thing. A lesser man might have confronted her directly and made everything worse. You protected your children the way a real father should."
"I should have seen it sooner," Daddy replied, his voice heavy with self-recrimination. "I should have protected them better." "You can't protect your children from every evil in the world," Aunt Ruth said firmly. "But when you discovered the truth, you handled it with wisdom and courage. That's what matters now." Daddy found immediate employment at the Knoxville Grain Company, where his experience and reputation for reliability quickly earned him a supervisory position with wages better than anything he had received in Millbrook. I enrolled in a proper school with trained teachers and well-stocked libraries, while Benjamin began attending an experimental elementary school that specialized in helping children from troubled backgrounds. Most importantly, Benjamin began the long, slow process of healing. Aunt Ruth arranged for him to speak with Dr. Morrison, a kindly physician who had developed innovative approaches to helping traumatized children. These weekly sessions, combined with the security of our new environment and the unwavering support of family who truly loved him, gradually helped Benjamin understand that the abuse had not been his fault and that he was genuinely safe now. "Tell me about the nightmares, Benjamin," Dr. Morrison would say gently during their sessions, which I was occasionally allowed to attend. "Are they always the same, or do they change?" "Sometimes she's chasing me," Benjamin would reply in his small, careful voice. "Sometimes I can't find Ellie or Daddy. Sometimes I'm back in that room and I can't get away." "And when you wake up from these dreams, what helps you feel better?"
"Knowing Ellie is right there, and remembering that Daddy promised she can't hurt me anymore." "Your father is a very smart man," Dr. Morrison would say. "He made sure you're protected now. The woman who hurt you is gone forever, and she can never come back. Do you believe that?" Gradually, as the weeks turned to months, Benjamin's answer to that question changed from uncertain silence to tentative nodding, to firm, confident agreement. The nightmares decreased in frequency, the bedwetting stopped entirely, and his natural curiosity about the world slowly reemerged. 2 years after our escape from Millbrook, our peaceful existence was shattered by news that arrived in an official letter from Sheriff Henderson. Mother and Robert Nash had been arrested in California on charges of fraud, theft, and murder. According to the sheriff's detailed account, their criminal partnership had flourished briefly after leaving Tennessee. They had targeted wealthy widows across multiple states, using Mother's beauty and Nash's charm to gain access to their victims' homes and finances. But their success had bred overconfidence and carelessness, and their final victim, Mrs. Elizabeth Hartwell of Sacramento, had survived their poisoning attempt long enough to identify them to authorities. During their arrest, Nash had become violent, severely beating Mother when she attempted to blame him for their crimes. She had been hospitalized with injuries that nearly proved fatal, And during her recovery, California investigators had connected them to at least 6 other murders across 3 states. Nash was convicted of multiple murders and sentenced to death by electric chair. Mother considered an accomplice under duress due to Nash's documented violence against her received life imprisonment without possibility of parole. The letter concluded with news that Nash had died in prison 6 months after his conviction, not from execution, but from a knife wound inflicted by another inmate who had learned about his history of harming children. When Daddy finished reading the letter aloud, we sat in stunned silence around Aunt Ruth's kitchen table. Benjamin, now 8 years old and remarkably resilient, spoke first.
Does this mean she can really never come back ever?
Never. Daddy confirmed, his voice gentle but absolutely certain. She made choices that led her far away from us, son. We're safe forever now.
Good, Benjamin said simply, then returned to playing with the wooden soldiers Daddy had carved for him. I found myself struggling with more complex emotions. Grief for the mother I had lost, relief that she could never threaten Benjamin again, and a troubling sense of satisfaction that justice had finally been served. It was Aunt Ruth who helped me understand that all these feelings could coexist without making me a morally compromised person. When my husband died in that mining accident, she told me one evening as we kneaded bread dough together. I felt sadness for losing him, anger that he'd been taken so young, guilt for not appreciating him more while he lived, and even relief that his suffering was over. Human hearts are large enough to hold contradictory emotions dear. Don't try to force yourself to feel only one thing. 5 years later, when I was 18, Daddy received an offer that would transform our lives once again. The Louisville Construction Company needed an experienced supervisor to oversee major building projects throughout Kentucky. The salary was substantial, housing was provided, and most importantly, it represented an opportunity to establish ourselves in a thriving city where our past would remain completely private. Louisville exceeded every expectation. It was a sophisticated, growing metropolis with excellent schools, cultural opportunities, and unlimited potential for advancement. Our company-provided house was the finest we had ever occupied, a 2-story Victorian with indoor plumbing, electric lights, and a telephone. Daddy flourished in his new role, earning rapid promotions based on his meticulous attention to detail and natural leadership abilities. Benjamin continued his academic excellence, revealing a sharp intellect and creative spirit that had been suppressed during our traumatic years. And I discovered an unexpected talent for business, transforming my sewing skills into a profitable enterprise, creating custom clothing and quilts for Louisville's fashionable ladies. It was in Louisville that I met Thomas Harper, a young architect who collaborated frequently with Daddy's construction projects. Thomas possessed all the qualities Mother's various lovers had lacked: integrity, kindness, genuine intelligence, and deep respect for family bonds. He courted me properly with Daddy's knowledge and explicit approval, bringing flowers every Sunday and spending hours on our front porch discussing his dreams of designing beautiful, lasting buildings. When Thomas asked for my hand in marriage, Daddy requested a private conversation with him. I watched anxiously from our kitchen window as they talked earnestly on the front porch for over an hour, wondering what family secrets might be shared, what judgments might be passed on our complicated history. When they returned to the house, both men were smiling, but there was something deeper in their expressions, a mutual respect that hadn't existed before their conversation. "Your father told me everything, Eleanor," Thomas said when we found ourselves alone later that evening. "About your mother, about what happened to Benjamin, about how you escaped Tennessee and rebuilt your lives here." My heart nearly stopped. Daddy had shared our most painful secrets with this man I hoped to marry. What if Thomas decided our family carried too much damage, too many complications? "And what do you think about all of that?" I asked, barely able to form the words. Thomas took my hands in his expression serious but warm. "I think your father is the most remarkable man I've ever encountered. He showed me the kind of courage and wisdom I hope to possess if I'm ever tested as severely as he was. I think you and Benjamin are survivors who have demonstrated extraordinary resilience and devotion to each other. He paused, his thumbs gently stroking my knuckles. But mostly, I think I'm incredibly fortunate that you've agreed to become my wife. And I want you to know that I consider myself honored to be joining a family with such strength and character. We married in the autumn of 1956 in a ceremony that perfectly symbolized our family's journey from darkness toward light. Daddy walked me down the aisle of Louisville's First Baptist Church, his face radiant with pride and joy. Benjamin, now 17 and remarkably mature for his age, served as Thomas's best man, looking dignified and handsome in one of Daddy's suits that Aunt Ruth had expertly altered for the occasion. As I stood at the altar, surrounded by the people who had saved, protected, and cherished me through our most difficult trials, I understood that Daddy's response to Mother's cruelty had been perfect in its completeness. He hadn't sought simple revenge. He had built something infinitely better in place of what she had tried to destroy. Thomas and I began our married life in a charming Victorian house in Louisville's historic district, and within 4 years we were blessed with 3 children, Samuel named for my father, Ruth honoring the aunt who had provided sanctuary, and Benjamin, whom we called Benji, in honor of my brother who had survived so much. Daddy retired at 65 and moved into a comfortable apartment we had built above Thomas's architectural office, allowing him to remain independent while staying close to his growing family. He proved to be an exceptional grandfather, teaching our children woodworking, fishing, and most importantly, the values of honest work, family loyalty, and protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Benjamin's journey toward complete healing required years of patient effort and continued professional guidance. Even surrounded by safety and unconditional love, he struggled with anxiety, trust issues, and occasional nightmares well into his 20s. But gradually, with Dr. Morrison's ongoing support and the unwavering encouragement of our family, he learned to transform his painful experiences into empathy and strength. Benjamin became the first person in our family to attend college, earning a scholarship to the University of Louisville based on his academic achievements and a remarkable personal essay about overcoming childhood trauma. He studied education and child psychology, driven by a powerful desire to help other children who might be suffering as he once had. After graduation, Benjamin accepted a teaching position at a Louisville elementary school, serving children from disadvantaged backgrounds. His colleagues were amazed by his almost supernatural ability to recognize signs of abuse or neglect. And his gentle, patient approach helped countless children find their voices and rebuild their confidence. How do you always know? His principal asked him one day after Benjamin had successfully identified and reported a case of severe neglect that other teachers had missed entirely. Because I remember what it feels like, Benjamin replied simply. I remember the fear, the shame, the desperate hope that someone would notice and care enough to help. When you've been there yourself, you recognize the signs in others. Benjamin married Sarah, a fellow teacher who shared his passion for child welfare and education. They raised 4 children of their own, Michael, Catherine, David, and Elizabeth, who grew up knowing they were completely safe and deeply cherished. One evening, when Benjamin was in his 40s and his own children were approaching adolescence, he sought me out for a conversation that had been years in the making. Ellie, he said, settling beside me on my front porch as fireflies danced across the lawn. I've never properly thanked you for what you did when we were children. You don't need to thank me for anything, Benny. You're my brother. Protecting you was simply what family does. But it was more than that, he insisted. You were just a child yourself, but you found the courage to speak the truth when it mattered most. You trusted Daddy when trust was terrifying. You helped save not just me, but our entire family. I considered his words carefully, thinking back to that frightened 13-year-old girl who had discovered horrors she couldn't comprehend. I think we all saved each other in different ways. Daddy with his planning and courage, you with your strength and resilience, me with, Well, with whatever small part I played. Your small part was believing that we deserved better, Benjamin said quietly. Your small part was refusing to let the darkness win. Do you have any idea how many children I've been able to help over the years because of what you taught me about speaking up, about trusting the right people, about believing that someone would care enough to listen? The weight of his gratitude was almost overwhelming, but it was also deeply healing. For the first time, I fully understood that our childhood trauma had been transformed into something positive, not just for our family, but for countless others who had benefited from Benjamin's wisdom and compassion. Daddy passed away peacefully in 1983 at the age of 79. He died in his sleep in the comfortable apartment above Thomas's office, surrounded by photographs and woodworking projects that documented a life of purpose and meaning. His funeral drew hundreds of people, former colleagues, neighbors, church members, and dozens of the children Benjamin had taught over the years, who remembered the kind gentleman who had helped with their homework during school visits. But it was the eulogy, delivered by Dr. Morrison, now elderly himself, that best captured Daddy's true character. Samuel Matthews was a man who understood that strength is not about dominating others, but about protecting those who cannot protect themselves, the old doctor said. When faced with the most devastating betrayal imaginable, he chose not revenge, but justice. When confronted with evil, he responded with wisdom. When his family needed saving, he became their salvation. The doctor paused, his eyes finding Benjamin and me in the front pew. But perhaps most remarkably, Samuel understood that the best way to defeat darkness is not to strike back at it, but to build something so bright, so beautiful, so filled with love, that the darkness becomes irrelevant. Look at this family he created. Look at the children who have been helped, the lives that have been changed, the love that continues to grow and spread. This is Samuel Matthews' true legacy. In the summer of 1995, when I was 57 years old, Benjamin and I decided to make a pilgrimage back to Millbrook. Neither of us had set foot in our hometown since that morning we departed with Mr. Henderson's wagon, but we both felt the need for final closure as we entered the later decades of our lives. Millbrook had changed remarkably little during our 40-year absence. The same dusty main street lined with weathered buildings, the same rolling hills covered in tobacco fields, even some of the same faces, now deeply lined with age and hard living. We drove directly to the small cemetery behind Millbrook Baptist Church, where we found Mother's grave, marked by a simple granite stone bearing only her name and dates, no epitaph, no flowers, no indication that anyone remembered or mourned her passing. Standing there in the warm Tennessee sunshine, looking down at the final resting place of the woman who had given us life, but nearly destroyed our souls, I searched my heart for any lingering resentment or bitterness. To my surprise, I discovered only profound sadness, not for her death, but for the life she had wasted, the love she had rejected, the good she might have accomplished if she had chosen differently. Do you ever wonder what she might have been like if she had made different choices? Benjamin asked, his voice barely audible above the whisper of wind through the cemetery's ancient oak trees. Sometimes, I replied honestly. She was intelligent and beautiful and capable of great charm when she chose to use it positively. But somewhere along the way, she decided that her own immediate gratification mattered more than anything or anyone else. That kind of selfishness eventually destroys everything it touches. I used to hate her, Benjamin admitted. For years, even after I understood intellectually that the abuse wasn't my fault, I carried this burning anger toward her. But working with traumatized children taught me something important about forgiveness. What's that? Forgiveness isn't about excusing what someone did to you. It's about refusing to let their choices continue poisoning your life. I forgave her not because she deserved it, but because I deserved to be free from that anger. We stood in comfortable silence for several more minutes. Two middle-aged survivors paying their respects to the woman who had shaped our childhood in the most terrible way imaginable. When we finally turned to leave, I felt a sense of completion. I hadn't expected, not closure exactly, but a kind of peaceful acceptance that this chapter of our story was truly finished. Before leaving Millbrook, we stopped at the old mill where Daddy had worked all those years ago. The building stood empty now, its massive grinding stones silent, its windows broken and boarded over. But standing in that dusty yard where he had earned our daily bread through honest labor, I felt his presence as strongly as if he were standing beside us. "He was extraordinary, wasn't he?" Benjamin said, apparently sharing my thoughts. "All those years when people thought he was weak, thought he was letting Mother walk all over him, he was actually planning our salvation. He was playing a longer game than anyone realized." I agreed. He understood that sometimes the strongest action is patient action, that sometimes protecting your children means enduring humiliation until you can strike at exactly the right moment with exactly the right weapon. "The recording device was brilliant," Benjamin mused. He couldn't have confronted her with just his word against hers. She was too beautiful, too charming, too skilled at manipulation. But her own voice confessing to her crimes, that was unassailable. We drove away from Millbrook that afternoon without looking back, our hearts lighter for having faced the past and found peace with it. The terrified children who had fled in the darkness were gone forever, replaced by adults who understood that even the most devastating experiences could be transformed into wisdom, strength, and compassion for others. Today, at 87 years old, I sit on the front porch of the Victorian house Thomas and I designed and built together over 30 years ago. The evening air carries the scent of honeysuckle and roses from the garden. Benjamin's daughter, Catherine, tends with such loving care. In the distance, I can hear my great-grandchildren, Samuel's grandson, and Benjamin's great daughter among them, playing elaborate games of their own invention, their laughter floating across the lawn like music. Thomas passed away 5 years ago, peacefully in his sleep, after 62 years of marriage that fulfilled every dream I had dared to harbor as a young bride. Benjamin, now in his 70s, but still teaching part-time and mentoring young educators, stops by every Sunday for dinner with whatever portion of the extended family happens to be in town. Our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren have scattered across the country, pursuing their own dreams, but they all know this house remains their anchor, their safe harbor, their reminder of where they came from and what they carry forward. Sometimes during these quiet evening hours, I find myself thinking about the legacy Daddy left behind, not just for our immediate family, but for all the lives that have been touched by the courage he showed in our darkest hour. Benjamin's students, now adults with children of their own, often write to thank him for the kindness and wisdom that helped them survive their own childhood traumas. My own children have raised their families with the understanding that honesty and mutual protection are the foundations of genuine love. But perhaps most remarkably, I can see Daddy's character traits, his patience, his careful observation, his quiet strength reflected in each new generation. Samuel's son has become a social worker specializing in child protection services. Ruth's daughter is a family law attorney who represents abused children in custody disputes. Even little Benji, named for his uncle, but bearing Daddy's gentle spirit, shows signs of the same protective instincts that saved our family all those years ago. This morning, as I was tending the roses Thomas planted for our 40th wedding anniversary, my great-granddaughter, Emma Benjamin's daughter, Sarah's youngest, approached with the serious expression she wears when wrestling with important questions. "Go, great-grandmother Ellie," she said, settling beside me on the garden bench. "Mama says you and Uncle Benjamin had some hard times when you were children, but that your daddy helped make everything better. Is that true?" I considered my answer carefully, as I always do when the youngest generation asks about our family history. We have never hidden the truth from our children, but we have always shared it in age-appropriate ways that emphasize healing rather than horror. "Yes, sweetheart," I replied, brushing a strand of her dark hair away from her face. There was a time when Uncle Benjamin and I were very scared and very sad. But our daddy loved us so much that he found a way to keep us safe and help us build a new happy life. Was he brave like the heroes in stories? He was the bravest person I've ever known, I told her honestly. But not because he fought dragons or rescued princesses. He was brave because he never gave up on making things better for the people he loved, even when it was very hard and very scary. Emma nodded solemnly, processing this information with the intensity that children bring to understanding their place in the world. I want to be brave like that too. You already are, sweet girl, I assured her, pulling her close for a hug. You're brave every time you tell the truth, every time you help someone who needs help, every time you choose to be kind instead of mean. That's the kind of bravery that really matters. As evening shadows lengthen across our lawn and the first fireflies begin their nightly dance, I find myself marveling at the distance we have traveled from that terrible night when I crouched beneath Benjamin's bed, trying to shield him from sounds no child should hear. The frightened girl who discovered unspeakable evil in her own home could never have imagined the peace and joy that would eventually emerge from that darkness. But perhaps that's the most important lesson Daddy taught us, that redemption is always possible, that love can indeed conquer hate, and that the most powerful response to destruction is creation. He didn't defeat Mother's evil by matching her cruelty with cruelty of his own. Instead, he built something so beautiful, so strong, so filled with genuine love, that her darkness simply became irrelevant. The laughter of my great-grandchildren, the success of Benjamin's career, helping other survivors, the solid marriages and happy families our children have created, all of this stands as testimony to Samuel Matthews' quiet triumph over the forces that tried to destroy us. He understood that the best revenge is not revenge at all, but rather the patient, determined construction of something better than what came before. As night falls and the family begins gathering for our traditional Sunday evening meal, I rise from my rocking chair and make my way inside, where the kitchen glows with warmth and the dining room table stretches to accommodate another generation of Matthew's descendants. The house fills with voices sharing stories, asking questions, planning adventures, and weaving the ongoing tapestry of our family narrative. And in the center of it, all invisible but undeniably present, is the spirit of the mill worker, who understood that true strength lies not in domination, but in protection, not in vengeance, but in love, not in tearing down, but in building up. This is what Samuel built, not just a family, but a legacy of hope that extends far beyond any one generation, touching lives he never met through the courage he showed when courage seemed impossible. In the end, that may be the greatest victory of all, not just that we survived, but that we learned to thrive, and that the lessons learned in our darkest hour continue illuminating the path for those who come after us. This is what Samuel built. This is what endures. This is what love looks like when it refuses to surrender to hate. And I am at peace